Good afternoon to you. Mark Suttoth, HurricaneTrack.com here. Time for the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for Friday, the 9th day of September 2022. It's getting towards peak time of the Atlantic hurricane season. It typically peaks, climatologically speaking, around the 10th or so of September. So I figured today is a good time to take a look at this question. Is that all there is, what we have had already, and a little bit of a look ahead to the remainder of the hurricane season, at least to the extent that I can do. I look around my office here, I don't see a crystal ball, and I don't see Biff Tannen's 50 years of hurricane history. You Back to the Future fans will get that joke. So I don't know for sure, but we can at least take a peek at what might be happening and speculate a little bit. That's what this is about, kind of discussing things. So let's get on with it, shall we? All right. First, National Hurricane Center homepage. We've got Earl out here. I tell you what, this struggled. I thought it was going to be stronger. The Hurricane Center thought it was going to be stronger. They typically do get stronger as they pass Bermuda. We've seen that in numerous cases. Something about the subtropics up there just lets these things rip and get loose there and strengthen, but this didn't. So it's just part of 2022, I guess. It did pass Bermuda with some near 60 mile per hour wind, a few power outages. But other than that, not a big problem. They were on the west side, Bermuda was, of Earl. Still has a small window of opportunity where it could become a major hurricane up in this corridor, and then it's going to transition to an extratropical storm in the far North Atlantic where it loses those tropical characteristics. This is Invest Area 95L. Forget about it. It's going to just be basically stretched apart and no longer even a definable tropical wave, I do believe. And then this system, probably not going to have much happening with that either. And then if we extend this out to the 5-day outlook, maybe something coming off Africa in a few days that could develop some model support for that. But as I'm going to show you, this area of the Atlantic out here is quite inhospitable for anything to really get going right now. All right, in the Pacific, there's K. Not too darn far south of San Diego right now, still as a tropical storm over very cold water temperatures, relatively speaking. We're talking about probably mid-70s at best, so maybe 24, 25 Celsius at tops, right? And then, of course, another area looks like it's going to try to develop south of the Gulf of Tehuantepec, which is about right here, all right, in the Pacific there. So looking at the satellite animation this afternoon, courtesy of Tropical Tidbits, we've got K over there just off the Baja, a fetch of moisture here coming up out of the Gulf. There's an upper level low sitting in this region, and that's going to bring a lot of moisture. Believe me, there's still a lot of energy down in the Caribbean and the Gulf, and that is getting advected or transported horizontally into the southeast, the Florida Panhandle, and parts of the peninsula. So a few periods of heavy rain and maybe even some squalls from time to time with some heavier thunderstorms that come rolling in off the Gulf. But that is a non-tropical feature, but it is a tropical air mass overall, certainly very juicy. And then there's Earl. I mean, it's trying, but it's running out of time. It's starting to lose some of its deeper convection, going to be moving into cooler water temperatures eventually, and probably not make it to major hurricane intensity, meaning that we will still be at 0 major hurricanes, Category 3 or higher, for the season. A very strange season indeed. There's 95L, or what's left of it. Just very dry air out here. A lot of talk about that on social media, on different websites like over at Storm2K on the message board there. A lot of speculation. Is it the volcano from January? Is it this? Is it that? You know, even aliens have been implicated. Those darn aliens, that's always the default, isn't it? There's that one GIF animation / animated meme or whatever you call it with that guy that's like, it's aliens. Who knows? Maybe it is. But the end result, we don't have to worry about hurricanes affecting land, and that is a good thing. We certainly know the misery, the destruction, the headaches that they can cause. So at least this year, so far, we are getting a break from that. On the large scale here. Obviously Bermuda yesterday, a little bit of an inconvenience there with Earl, and K over on the Baja did bring some impacts, but certainly No Idas this year, no Lauras, nothing like that, no Dorians yet. It's not over, though. It's only September 9th, and I say that just to keep you in the loop that it's not over till it's over, and that is absolutely true. And nobody knows for sure. I mean, I don't know if we're going to have any more hurricanes develop at all, and I don't know if any are going to impact land, but I do know what the calendar is, and it is not November 30th. So we got to stay engaged and keep an eye on what's going on out there, just in case, especially if something gets over here where conditions could be more favorable, and a vast majority of the people that care about hurricanes live here. We don't want to forget our friends in the islands either, but I'm just saying, you know, everything's out in the East Atlantic now, but that could change, especially as the seasons change, and I'll talk about that more in just a moment. Also, in the Eastern Atlantic, there is some dust coming off of Africa here. You can see that right there, but it's just a general dry, very stable air mass out here that is not allowing deep thunderstorm activity. And in fact, when you see this little speckled color all through here, these stratocumulus clouds, forget it. That is a very stable air mass that you can look at. If you were on a boat out there and looked up, it would just be this amazing sky of like these cumulus clouds, all as far as the eye could see. Probably make for an amazing sunset. But that is a stable air mass signature if I've ever seen it. Now, there is turning. You can clearly see some cyclonic turning here. Certainly 95L has some cyclonic turning with it. But the thunderstorms, those are what, or the convection, that's what drives these things, and the lack of convection is keeping them from developing. And so they're just not. And then there's another piece of energy that will work its way off of Africa in the next 3 days that the Euro especially is pretty gung-ho about. The Euro. Wait till I show you that later on. All right, precipitable water in the atmosphere. Look at what happens with Earl. It just like depletes there in the last few frames. So weird. So weird of a season there. It looked like it was going to be really ramping up, maybe become a Category 4. Most of the intensity guidance was all over that happening, and then not so much. Probably wrap some dry air into it as well. It's that mid-level dry air that is just prevalent out here all across the Atlantic. And even over in the western Pacific, there's really not been much typhoon activity. We had that one, Hinam-Nor, or however you pronounce it, but really that's about it out in the West Pacific as well. Granted, the La Nina is going on in the Pacific, and that tends to hold down western Pacific activity, but it's just been sort of a dead year pretty much everywhere. By the way, before I forget, when we bring me back on, if you're keeping track at home, and I know you are, the ACE score right now, we're getting close to, we'll just round it up, we're getting close to 30. So we're also getting close to roughly rounding it up about 60% of where we should be. So we're still, another way to look at it, 40% below the ACE, the accumulated cyclone energy. How much energy are these hurricanes and tropical storms that we have had? And there haven't been that many, obviously. How much energy are they outputting or expending? And right now that score is basically close to 30. And I think we're supposed to be about 48 or something like that by now. So, yeah, we're running below the long-term average. Now, back to the analysis at hand. There's very dry air, and this is also fairly dry air. This is drier, the blue. And it's just the way the color code is on here. One of our supporters, Karen, mentioned this the other several weeks ago, I think on our Discord or maybe in a Patreon message to me, that this was confusing, that we always associate blue with water, but in this case, you just got to look at what the legend is telling you, and to understand what you're looking at. The blue here is the lack of water, the low precipitable water values. That would be your blues and greens. Your higher moisture content would be these oranges and even your pinks and purples or whatever those are. That's just the way the map is set up here. Total precipitable water, blue and green is less, oranges and those purple colors or whatever that is, magenta, something like that, is more. And you can see it is pretty darn dry out here in the Eastern Atlantic, despite these rotating areas of energy. They are there. They're just not convectively active, as we already talked about. And just to drive the point home even further, here you go, Saharan air layer, even some dust out here coming down out of the northeast Atlantic, some of it off of Africa itself, and it all just gets mixed in with these systems. They try to sort of breathe in, we call that the inflow. They develop thunderstorms, add all that pulls air in, and you're just pulling more dry air in. It's like being in a room. I know this is morbid, but it's like being in a room with poison air. You take a breath just to try to survive, and you ingest that poison air, and you're done. That's what happens with these systems. In this case, the poison air, so to speak, for convection is dry air, dry mid-level air. That won't help convection at all. And notice, this is what I mean, over in the western part of the Atlantic Basin, the Caribbean and the Gulf, that's part of the North Atlantic Basin, much more moist over there. I mean, clearly, look at that big plume coming up. So if something survives, one of these tropical waves, if they get over here, or another source of vorticity or energy, a seedling or spin in the atmosphere, sometimes you get this Central American gyre that can fire up. Sometimes you get fronts that come down, and you get some focusing along the tail end of these fronts, maybe an upper level low. And once in a while, vorticity can come off of South America, get pulled into the flow around the Central American gyre, and try to organize in the Northwest Caribbean. That's usually later in September, and that is why I don't want to just hang up the season and say, we're done, we're not having anything else. No, I don't think that's all there is, and it's just logic, all right? Not reaching, not seeing something that's not there. There is no way to know that the season is going to produce or not produce. There's just absolutely no way to know. But logic would dictate, and history would dictate, that yes, we should see some activity over here the later into September we go, and then certainly through October, especially since the atmosphere is not static. It's going to change. So we may see a shift that gives us a burst of 2 or 3 hurricanes. We might not. Maybe there's nothing. That's what we're here to find out together. All right, a couple of things that I think are interesting. We'll use black here just to delineate things. The La Nina definitely strong in the Pacific here. So that is a very positive thing for Atlantic hurricane activity, especially through the Caribbean over here, and especially later in the season. So we'll see if this comes into play. That typically reduces wind shear because there's just not as much upward motion going on in the Pacific. There is the cold wake left from K, and then here's the cold wake left from Earl thus far, and then a little bit of the cold wake, or cooling effect, if you will, taking the heat out of the ocean from Danielle over there in the far North Atlantic. But the rest of the deep tropics here warmer than they should be, from Africa all the way over to the coast of Texas. But again, this has got to be a player. This has got to be a big player. These ridiculously warm anomalies. As I said earlier, lots of theories as to why globally the tropics are not producing much deep thunderstorm activity. And yet, I saw a tweet here, I think it was from either Andy Hazelton or Brian McNulty. One of them mentioned, I think it was Andy, that the monsoons on the continents this year have been pretty active, but the tropics themselves over the oceans with precipitation has been less active. So kind of weird in that regard too. All right, so a look ahead here. We're going to contrast the GFS with the Euro, of course. This is the current look at the GFS. This is from the 12Z run today at 850 millibars of the atmosphere. And there is Earl at 850 millibars, and that's that vorticity that we talk about. That's 95L. Certainly represented with low-level vorticity, as is this system here. And then there's a little bit more energy sitting over Africa. And then there's a little bit of energy up here in the northeastern Gulf, but not focused very much. Certainly a non-tropical entity. All right, so let's move this out into time. We're going to go out all the way to 2 weeks, just because I want to show you how things evolve. So Earl goes on up, becomes extratropical, and maybe for a day or two, no name storms on the map. Maybe longer, we'll see. So we go on out, we're now out at a week, and there's really not much out there to speak of. There's a tropical wave right there. Might be just a little piece of energy here, another piece of energy up here. You know, inconsequential. I'm not too worried about any of those. at this point in time. Keeping on out into time, there's 8 days, 9 days, and then finally 10 days out. Not much. That little area off of North Carolina, who knows, right? But we start to see, and this is where we just don't know. Is the model just like doing GFS stuff? But at day 10, look what happens over here. We start to develop this large cyclonic gyre in the Western Caribbean, maybe shifting towards that CAG, or Central American gyre setup, where the seasonal shift just creates this large area of cyclonic rotation in the Western Caribbean. Then on the eastern side, sometimes that vorticity concentrates and you can give birth to a tropical cyclone, storm, or hurricane, right? So we shall see, does this persist and actually amount to something? Does it even happen 10 days out? Well, we'll know, because 10 days from now we can look and see. And you can see what happens. The GFS gets crazy with it, and it develops your usual suspects in the Western Caribbean, rotating it around the Yucatan there. You've seen this before. You know how this ends. But the GFS indicating a little bit of a pattern change with more areas to watch, maybe, and there's another tropical wave way out in time, way out there. This is 2 weeks out. It could be completely different. It could look very similar. I'm just showing you, this is where the GFS thinks we're headed on today's 12Z run. So let's just go back to the initial conditions, shall we? Right there, and compare that to the Euro. Now the Euro goes out only to 10 days here, so that's as far as we can take it. And so let's do that. You see Earl there, very easily discernible. It jumps up into the northern latitudes. Now, the Euro does develop another tropical wave here that comes off of Africa. That is this system over here. I'll just show you real quick. Right there. That's this system. 20% over the next few days. There it is. So by 96 hours, even before that, at 72 hours, the Euro is suggesting that that vorticity gets concentrated and off it goes, and we'd have another named storm out there. It develops it rather quickly. I am very skeptical because, as I showed you, the eastern Atlantic over here is just so dominated by dry air. Now, the Euro has typically been, you've seen people talk about it, King Euro. If the Euro doesn't show it, I don't believe it. It's almost like rival sports teams, the GFS versus the Euro. I mean, it's been nuts over the years, the different people that hang everything on the Euro and don't believe the GFS and vice versa. Well, the Euro, just to remind you, the ECMWF, the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, the whole group there of their forecasters, all of their sophisticated models that do these types of runs on the operational numerical weather prediction as well as ensembles. They also do climate models, sea surface temperature forecast models. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And remember back in June, it was predicting the ECMWF an ACE this year of 225 plus or minus. And then in August, it was still predicting a very busy season. Early September, still a very busy season. I'm going to show you that, especially backloaded. And none of that has come to pass to speak of. We're at the very bottom end of where we should be. We've already talked about that. The ACE score, we're not even half of where we should be, much less 225. So I am having a hard time believing that it's going to nail even a 5-day forecast when it's gotten so much wrong with the season as a whole. I just don't know. Does the model know how hostile it is out here? You would think as sophisticated as the ECMWF model stuff is, all the people that program it, it's mathematics, it's physics, the input, like by now somebody should have told the model it ain't happening, so to speak. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe this happens, maybe it doesn't. I just think it's interesting because, I mean, look, we can verify it in 96 hours or so. We can go out and look on the satellite, even 72 hours. Is there a well-developed tropical wave sitting right off the coast of Africa Monday morning? So when I do my What's Up segment Monday morning, we'll kind of know, right? I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but it's like, it's hard to understand and really know what's happening because the guidance is guiding us in the wrong direction. These things that, especially the Euro, are suggesting just are not happening. Now, I bring you to this. I had mentioned a few things here in relation to this tweet from Andy about these tropical waves and how they tend to be weaker through time, etc. And then people were talking about the Euro, and Kalen here had this very interesting response. He says, "Ask and you shall receive the extremely backloaded season expected by the ECMWF there." This is the weeklies that that group puts out, the ECMWF. And this is the ACE forecast going forward. Okay, this is day 12 through 18, and the ACE is supposedly going to be 40% of above normal, right? That's what that means, at 1.4. Days 12 through 18, going out towards the end of September. Okay, we'll see about that. And it gets even more ridiculous. Then, days 19 through 25, the ECMWF saying 230%, right? Like, what? Are you serious? And then it gets even more comical by days 26 through 32. So getting out to early October, early to mid-October, 240%. I mean, it dominates everywhere around the globe. Look at that. Nothing even gets close. The Atlantic, the Euro says, will absolutely just be crazy busy with ACE as we get into October. Now, the question I have, and I wish I could dig into this more, what is this model system seeing, so to speak, that makes it think this or project this? It's not thinking. If it starts thinking, we're in trouble. You know what I mean? But seriously, like, why? Why does it show this? It's not just, oh, there's a green bar graph of statistical analysis here that it says 2.4 above the mean, and yeah, that's it. There's reasoning behind it. So I'm trying to dig in. I'll ask some of these people and find out what is it seeing, so to speak. And there's been some response and people talking about it with the debate. Oh, yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. Because that's what Kalen says, by the way. At this point, I have about a higher chance of winning the lottery than this happening. Well, it depends on which lottery. Some lotteries, you have a 1 in 23 shot, right? It just depends. If it's the Mega Millions, yeah, exactly. It's basically zero. But this is interesting that it keeps holding on. The Euro, the ECMWF, that the season will be very, very busy 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out. Eventually, it's going to be January, and we'll be ringing in 2023. So we shall see, right? So there you go. I just present what I look at, and we talk about it here, or at least I show you, and then you comment on it, and we talk about it on our Discord with our patrons, and we see what develops. But at least for now, after Earl, probably a quiet period coming up. And I don't think that's all that there will be. Of course not. There's just too much time on the clock. We've already gone over all of that. I presented my reasons why it just doesn't make sense to say, that's it, season is over. We're not quite there yet. So we shall see. At least for the weekend, though, things will be relatively quiet, except, and real quick too, the swells and the rip current threat along the east coast of the U.S. Should have mentioned that in more detail, but please don't forget that. I did show it on today's What's Up segment. Take that to heart. Rip currents can send you home in a body bag. Again, don't mean to be morbid, but it is true. You have to be very, very careful, especially heading down to the beach with it being still very warm in the southeast, especially in eastern North Carolina, the Outer Banks. Please be careful because I need you. I need you on your end of the screen to, to watch, or there's no reason for me to do this, right? All right, that is it for me. Have a great weekend ahead. No hurricane outlook and discussion videos this weekend, but I will have the morning What's Up segments, and then I'll be back with an in-depth discussion on Monday afternoon. All right? All right. I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you again a couple times over the weekend.